Hello, and welcome back to my intermittently active channel. So on Saturday, December 12th, I had an interesting and fun conversation with Joseph Nolla, a Jesuit I've met recently on Twitter. We've had several interesting conversations about theism, and he mentioned that he'd been an atheist at one point. And that's a long journey, to go from atheist to be studying to be a Jesuit priest. So we sat down and had a conversation about that trip. What follows is that interview. To my atheist viewers, this is a conversion story, and like many of you, I had questions about his conversion. Some of which I thought of and asked at the time, and others I've thought of since. I encourage you to reach out to Joseph either here in the comment section or on his Twitter to politely ask those questions. I trust that my small audience knows the difference between questioning ideas and disrespecting someone. So ask your questions. The video itself has been uploaded with minimal editing. I just removed a few sections where we had technical difficulties and a section where I hit the stop recording button too soon. Snail is totally a professional, guys. I totally am. So thanks for watching, and I hope you find this conversation as interesting as I did. I'm recording now so that you don't feel weird. It's a privacy thing with me. You tell people what you're doing. Okay, problem. I lost your face. There we go. Okay. Apparently, the program doesn't want you to be the one behind. Okay, so, Joseph, how about you start with a little bit about yourself, like a little history. Something you'd want people who are watching this and who might be asking us questions after it's done, you'd want them to know about you.
Okay, my name's Joe Nolla. I am a Jesuit, which is an order, a religious order of men in the Catholic Church. Kind of like you have Benedictine monks and Franciscan friars and Dominican friars, you have Jesuits. And I'm studying to become a Catholic priest. And I'm living in St. Louis studying philosophy right now, philosophy and theology.
Oh, fascinating. So is your family Catholic, or this is?
No, they're Catholic, quite Catholic actually. My father's, they're uber Catholic. My father is a deacon.
Okay.
In the church, and so yeah, I was very much raised Catholic.
Okay. Welcome to the club. I think it's on my page somewhere, but I am an ex-Catholic. So when you say we were Catholic, I know what you mean. My father was in the Knights of Columbus very heavily.
Okay. All right.
I'm assuming as a Jesuit, you were also in the Knights of Columbus.
No.
Shame.
Yeah,
Shame.
I honestly, I don't know if they would really want a guy like me. Like, I don't know if I'm necessarily on the right. I don't know. I don't know.
I'll have to sing.
I'm a little out there.
I'll have to sing a night on you. They want all the Jesuits and all the priests.
Alrighty.
All right. So your family's Catholic. You're raised in the faith. Any little things about growing up that you remember? Fun stuff that happened at the church or family things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was pretty good. I would move around a bunch as a kid. Military family. But every parish that I would be a part of, it was good. We were always very involved, and I always had friends there. And I got involved in altar serving in like 6th grade, and I really liked it. And those were probably my first times thinking that I wanted to become a priest. Would have been as an altar server.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it didn't last long. But I thought, yeah.
We covered what you're studying, philosophy, theology. Anything in particular in philosophy that you're interested in, or just kind of an overarching study now? I don't know where you are in your studies, and I'm not.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So I'm right at the very smack beginning of it. I just finished my first semester, of grad school with it. Now, as an undergrad, I minored in philosophy. But that was, a different
Yep.
walk of life, as it were, you know. But,
Undergrad compared to postgrad is two different things. I got it.
yeah. Yeah, but it was yeah, a lot of fun.
Okay.
But as far as like the types of philosophy that I'm probably most interested in right now, you know, I mean, I got to say, probably philosophy of religion. It's just, you know, a kind of a nice mixture of like the theology and philosophies.
I have to be honest. I didn't know there was a philosophy of religion. Is there like the dummy's guide to what that involves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I didn't know it was really a thing either when I was studying philosophy as an undergrad. I just kind of thought, like, I thought you have philosophy, this big umbrella term, and area of study, and then you have theology, which is just the subset of philosophy that concerns God.
Sure.
Turns out, no, apparently, that's not how it is. That theology is much more apparently focused on a particular understanding of God. It's like, say, maybe the Christian or the Muslim or whatever understanding of God, more like intra-religious.
Okay.
Yeah, and philosophy of religion is just much more broad. Closer, I guess, to natural theology. But, yeah.
Okay. No, that's very cool. Things I didn't know.
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out, though. But, I mean, yeah.
Hey, if I had $1 bazillion, I would spend my entire life in a university or a college just studying all the things, because there's too much to learn.
I hear it.
So you are in your you're in your grad. So how far away are you from becoming an actual working priest?
So that'll probably be in about 10-ish years.
Okay, so you're on long course.
Oh yeah, for the Jesuits, it is the longest priestly formation in the whole Catholic Church. For most priests, it takes about 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
The Jesuits have a particular requirement that they actually have to study longer and be more educated than the average priest. It's actually a requirement. So I have to do what is called first studies, which is what I'm in right now, which is 3 years, where I do my grad work in philosophy, and I do a year of theology. And then after that, I do about 3 years of full-time ministry.
Okay.
Very often that's in a school teaching. And then after that, I go right back to school and finish up theology. And that's about another 3 years.
Okay, that's awesome. I knew, as a ex-Catholic, I knew that the Jesuits were highly educated and everything. I didn't know exactly what was involved in all of that. So that's cool.
Okay.
I'm not at all jealous. Okay, so I guess the point of the conversation was we were discussing, you'd said at Twitter at some point that you had been an atheist in your life. Mm-hmm. So this kind of came about to talk about that. So I guess, when were you an atheist and what led you to your atheism?
So there was this kind of disillusionment, I would say, that started happening in high school. I would say it really began my freshman year of high school. I had been, before then, as I said, military family, so kind of moving around, and had previously spent about 6 years overseas. And coming back to the States, honestly, I didn't like what I saw, particularly among like the religious right.
Gee, I can't imagine why you wouldn't like that.
I know, yeah.
No reason at all.
So the first bit of disillusionment came through seeing really just the hypocrisy among so many Christians. People that claim to be so faithful to the gospel, but just couldn't give a damn about the poor or anything like that at all. Mm-hmm. And so that really started to make me question. And then, other things would kind of come up. On a certain level, it kind of feels like a fairy tale,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, we just almost like you almost kind of want to instinctively think that there's no way this is really happening. I mean, come on. I mean, it's a fairy tale. That's how it sounds. So, I mean, that was also kind of working in the background for me. And then also, you know, there was just some of the morality issues. You know, I was quite involved with my girlfriend and stuff like that, and you know, the church had their own. The church has its own ideas of like sexual morality that I was really just not at all a fan of. You know, so that bothered me.
Okay.
And I would say the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge. So I already have these doubts about God and about Christianity, and Christian practice. But I would say the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge was, you know, for the risk of TMI, yeah, I got in trouble for going a little too far with my girlfriend, as it were. And it was Mass on Holy Thursday, and during Holy Week, and I just received communion, and I'm in a lot of trouble, as I said. And I'm back at the pew, and I'm staring down the crucifix. And, you know, I'm thinking, you know, this is all your fault, you know, right? That I'm getting so much trouble, this whole morality thing. And the way I saw it is, you know, I had kind of two options. You know, I could try to live in conformity with this religion whose teachings I don't really believe in at this point. Or I can just abandon it and do what I want to do and be and just not pretend, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I chose that. So that was kind of like the catalyst. That was like the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge.
Okay. Just for clarification, because people can interpret things in any different ways, the trouble with your girlfriend was trouble with the family, not necessarily, not legal trouble.
Right, yeah, no, it's just kind of like the parents found out, you know, we were having sex and stuff. And
yeah, that's what I assumed.
A full freak out about that. Yeah.
Yes, no, that's what I assumed it was, but you know how people are.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Good point.
Clarity. So, you're late teens, you know, sounds like you're a little angry. Sad. Yeah. Disillusioned with the church, can understand why. So, were you, if I'd have asked you in your teens, would you have said you were an atheist, or would you just said you weren't Catholic? Do you remember?
It would have depended probably on who had asked.
Okay.
Because, you know, I was still involved in the church. I still had to go to the Eucharist. I didn't have a choice. Like, I had to be involved. Yeah. So,
if someone you trusted asked you, someone who wouldn't have judged you either way.
Yeah, I would have said, like, when my friends would ask, I would say, yeah, I don't believe. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. And how long were you an atheist, or didn't you believe?
It would have been about 6 years.
Oh, so for quite a while. Okay. Would you have considered yourself an agnostic atheist or a Gnostic atheist?
Yeah, so it kind of fluctuated.
Okay.
I mean, I would never have actually said that I know that there's no God. For that same whole thing of like you can't disprove something's existence type thing. But there were times of greater confidence, I should say, that there was no God.
Okay. All right. Did you do a lot of reading into, because it sounds like we've really gotten into philosophy now. I don't know if you were then. Did you do a lot of reading into different philosophies and stuff then?
I thought so at the time. Yeah. But no, I mean, it was like really, in reality, it was a very kind of cursory thing. The readings that I had done on atheism were actually rather old. So a lot of it was, kind of like Feuerbach, Hume, Marx, Freud,
Okay.
and some Russell. And later, then it was just kind of like the new atheists. Um, but your more analytic philosophy types of atheists, and agnostics like Paul Draper, and Schellenberg, like those guys, I would have never had any. I had no idea who those people were. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else you think important for people to know about the time period when you were an atheist?
The one thing that I think is sort of relevant is that on one hand, like it's still also very much, me in my early 20s, largely. And there's, at the same time as, my atheism, there's also just a great deal of just personal searching that's going on. And, just trying to just figure myself out, trying to figure the world out, my place in it, all that other stuff. So, I mean, I'm sure there are many inconsistencies from like early 20s, but I think that's just something probably universal to anyone in their early 20s. Just
you're in your 20s. I mean, you know it all and you know nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I remember being in my 20s. You know it all and you know nothing.
Yeah.
All right. So, what started you back away from atheism towards theism?
So, well, I mean, it was a handful of things. So once I was like committed to atheism and made that decision, well, there went my Catholicism as well. So really, kind of there went my worldview in many ways. So that really did kind of leave a huge philosophical void in me at the time. So I kind of felt like I needed something to, like, some sort of philosophy to kind of be the kind of like my guiding set of principles, And I didn't have the wherewithal to develop my own. But I was drawn increasingly to Marxism, because I'd always had a passion for the poor and for justice, and I respected Marxism for that. So that kind of became my approach. But and I read very deeply into all the Marxist and Engels and Leninist literature. I got really into that.
Okay.
But also, I kept on reading other things and studying more and more of history, and coming to the realization that Stalin and Mao probably ruined it for everyone. Yeah. Good luck getting the revolution to kick off.
Yeah.
So I also ended up kind of developing a kind of disillusionment with communism. So, I mean, now what? And so what I kind of found then is going from that far left. So I just decided to swing. Well, hell, let's just see what the far right kind of has to offer, And I sort of went down to this uber patriotic weird mold, and ended up even joining the military. But there was like the whole basic training, or for my case, officer training school type stuff, where there's certainly some indoctrination involved.
Sure.
But once I got out of that, and processed the Kool-Aid that I had drank, I was able to sort of mellow out and actually start really trying to think of things. Also, being a little bit older helped.
So you're ex-military too?
That's right.
Oh, thank you for your service.
Thank you. But the things that would sort of kind of lend me to eventually maybe reconsider my atheism would be driving to then my fiance's house on on weekends. Yeah, I was engaged for a while as well. I'm, and yeah. There's a weird backstory going on here.
Honestly, you sound like growing up all my favorite priests in the Catholic Church. Because they were all ex-military guys who had actually lived for a while before becoming priests. So they were a lot easier to talk to.
Okay, all right. I'll take that. But she lived about, I don't know, like an hour and a half away. And on weekends, I would travel down to stay with her. And I would always have to travel by this Catholic church, St. Dominic's in Panama City, Florida. And every time I would drive by, I would sort of feel this kind of invitation to be there,
Okay.
There were times where, honestly, I even as an atheist, I would have said, I could sort of feel something from within the tabernacle inviting me back. To this day, I've never gone inside that church. But there was one day, as I was driving by, I thought, well, I can at least. I'm not sure if I'm certainly not a Catholic. I don't believe this stuff. But, maybe I can at least sort of think about my atheism again, and at least see what I really believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I use the term see what I really believe and not choose what I believe. Because honestly, I don't really think that belief is in many ways so much a choice.
There's a lot of science that indicates that it isn't a choice.
Right, yeah, and on just my own, like, just human experience, like, if we're to think of belief as being convinced of something,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't choose to be convinced of something. I notice that I'm convinced, So I just want to see if what do I actually believe? So I decided, I was thinking then about, the beginning of the universe. And as I understood, cosmology at the time, it was this idea that, okay, well, the universe had a beginning. At least high confidence the universe had a beginning, and that matter didn't always exist. That there was a time then before matter. I'm probably using the worst terminology at all. So I hope you just kind of bear with me.
You're fine. Physics is not my field.
Okay. All right. Yeah. There's probably some scientists who will listen to this and just have like their head explode. I'm like, what is he talking about?
Trust me, I can tell you exactly who is going to be exploding his head all over us.
All right. So just right off the bat, I'm sorry for getting this wrong. Yeah. But I decided that I would play a little bit of a thought experiment. Okay. Working with the assumption that, okay, if there was this time before matter, then at some point matter appeared. All right?
All right.
So let me then put myself in my imagination into the void before matter appears. And let me just observe matter appearing, and let's just see what happens to me, like inside, like internally, and what my thoughts are and my attitudes. So I did that, So in my mind, I'm knocking around in the void, just chilling, doing nothing, and then all of a sudden, matter appears, like this little dot, this kind of singularity, I guess, if you will, appears, and honestly, my initial reaction was, holy shit, what's this here? Why? What's going on here? There's got to be a reason for this. Because here in the void, stuff doesn't just happen. What's going on? And I realized that I was making some assumptions, that saying kind of like what's going on, why, presuming a kind of intelligibility to it. And as I saw it, that if there's an intelligibility to something, then there's kind of an intelligence behind it. And intelligence is personal. I assume that there could be someone who could answer that why. Why is this here? You know, those were the that's what I was bringing to the table, and I hadn't quite realized it until then. And so thinking, okay, if the universe began, and I believe that there is a reason, that an inexplicable reason, and not just that someone can actually explain it, then I can't really be an intellectually honest atheist. You know, if this is what I'm actually working with, and what I'm bringing to the table. So I recognize, all right, well, then turns out I'm not really an atheist, at least in this moment. You know? Yeah, so I believed in a God. Now, I mean, I didn't become a Christian. I would have been much more just a deist at that point. The only things I could assign to God would have been, you know, God's a creator, you know?
Yeah.
And pretty decent evidence, you know, assuming that God is a creator, you know, that, okay, well, also an intelligent one, because, I mean, I certainly couldn't do this, you know? So, you know, thinking, okay, so God's an intelligent creator, but anything as far as, you know, being loving, or being a judge, or being a ruler, all this other stuff, no, I mean, that's not where, I didn't have the data to support that at the time, so I just kind of became a deist.
Okay.
For a while. Yeah.
All right. So that's the transition from atheist to deist. And
right.
While I have specific questions about your train of thought of there, we're not going to do that today.
Okay.
How do you go from, it's a long journey from deist to Roman Catholic, then to specifically Jesuit? Let's be honest here. These are some big jumps. So talk me through some of those jumps there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So,
I mean, because at the time you're doing this, you're still engaged to your fiance.
Right.
So, I mean, you've gone from a fiance and getting married to now you're marrying the church or God or however you want to describe it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I always thought those are weird to kind of terminologies. Like, I don't know.
So, I don't know if you have a lot of girls in your family, but I'm Roman Catholic from the female side. I'm a female in the Roman Catholic Church. Was in the Roman Catholic Church. I was looking at becoming a nun at one point. What they tell you if you're going to become a nun is you're marrying the church or Christ.
Yeah.
Which, let's be honest, is very freaking creepy. But if they're telling me that, it's pretty much the same for a priest, right? Turnabout's fair prey. I just creeped the crap out.
I kind of like that had never really resonated with me, and I didn't know how I felt about that until I was in Kansas City, you know, as a Jesuit, and I was talking with these sisters, and you know, I let out, you know, the thing about, you know, kind of like being like, you know, a bride of like Christ or bride of the church, and these were, you know, very experienced, very mature, old sisters, and they said, yeah, that's just never really been for me. It was, oh my gosh, this relief. Like, okay, so it's okay if I just straight up don't feel that way about it. All right, good.
No, it was. I remember hearing those and going, oh my gosh, that's utterly creepy.
Yeah.
All right, back on track. Sorry, I sidetracked us there.
No, I hear it. So, so running around, kind of being a little deist and engaged. Over time, though, the relationship with the fiance, you know, we started when we were 19, right?
Yep.
No, actually, so we started, no joke, on my 19th birthday. And, you know, and we were together literally until my 25th birthday. That's when we called it. But honestly, you change so much.
Oh, gosh, yes.
in those times. And so, I was kind of going one route, she was kind of going another route. We just kind of just grew in two different directions. And also in that time, part of that growth for me was kind of thinking about God. And one of the things I was kind of working with is, all right, so God's up there. I say up there. I mean, I don't really believe in that cosmology.
Got it. No.
Yeah. And has created this this universe. And I accepted, and thinking that, okay, well, God's also probably omniscient. I bought into the idea of God being eternal. And so as I saw it, if God is eternal and outside time, if God knows anything, then God knows really all that can be known, all possible facts. No, all facts within the temporal world, God knows.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that I know, joke, will do, or have done, God knows. And everything, that has happened or will happen, God knows. So then I started thinking, okay, well then, God knows about all of this. Why is it here? And I kind of thought, well, all right, first off, why is it here? Does God need this? Does God need the universe and everything in it? And I thought, no, clearly God doesn't need that. Just because God pre-exists it, If God needed it, then God couldn't pre-exist it. It'd be a requirement for God. So God doesn't need it. And yet it exists. So why? And, the way I saw it is, okay, well, if God doesn't need it and it exists, well, probably the best explanation is that God wants it to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so then thinking, okay, then that means the universe is desirable. And what is in the universe is also desirable. Like all the planets, all the galaxies, all the plants, animals, you, me, everything natural, if you will, to the universe is desirable. And therefore good, in a way, So then, working with that, then thinking, all right, well then what is the purpose of things? So, and I brought it to myself, what then is my purpose? And the way I saw it, and actually still see it, is, okay, well, to try and find out what the purpose of some created thing is, I don't think I necessarily have to go to the creator to ask, Like, we might not have to ask the person who built a car what the purpose of a car is. We could probably be able to figure that out just by careful examination of the car,
Yep.
And so I figured, well, let me just do that. Let me carefully examine myself and see what sort of, and just my species, if you will, and what's the purpose. And some things kind of, stood out to me. Intelligence is one thing. Agency. There's relationality. And
What do you mean by relationality?
The ability to relate.
Okay, empathize.
Yeah. So think kind of like if we're a computer, we have an interface,
Yep.
And an ability to grow and learn. So I remember thinking, okay, well, let me put myself in a creator's position. Let's say I were to build a robot or something, and I were to give it real intelligence, an ability to learn and think. I give it agency or freedom, so a real kind of free artificial intelligence type thing. I give it relationality, an interface, and emotional capacity, what would make sense to think kind of like, okay, well, it would make sense to think that I created this, so this thing can have relationships on its own terms to an extent, you know?
Okay.
So they can like relate to other subjects. And you know, as the creator of it, I mean, it makes sense that, you know, all right, I would probably want to have some sort of interactions with this robot I just created, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay, that's kind of where I sort of see the best explanation for it. Maybe that's the case with God, you know? That God created us so we could have relationships with each other and relationships with God and all created things. You know, and I feel that this same approach we can be used to trying to find, you know, God's uh, the intentions and purposes for all created things. And so, for example, you know, I mean, humans aren't the only creatures with those 5 characteristics. I think it was 5 that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also believe, you know, maybe in different ways, but yeah, God wants relationships with sentient creatures, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just humans, in my opinion. So I'm thinking, okay, all right. So that's my purpose and the purpose of humans. That's how I saw it and still see it. Relationship with God and creation. So if God wants relationship, well, what would God do about it? You know? How would God maximize that relationship aspect? And I thought, okay, well, if we're these tangible physical beings in the physical universe, and God is a spiritual being, there's really almost kind of like an immeasurable distance that's a gulf separating us.
Mm-hmm.
So if God really wants relationships, God's going to have to do something about that. God's going to have to breach that gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that it would make total and utter sense for God then to enter the world, to enter the universe, the physical universe, to take on physicality and enter. So I began to see the incarnation as something that makes total sense within this framework of understanding. That, yeah, you know, if what I have been saying is true, then I think, yeah, it would make total sense for God to become a physical person. And that would probably be a human, you know, and then God can relate to people and with creation in a far more intimate way.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, realizing that made me believe in Christianity, because Christianity posits just that the incarnation, that, you know, God became a man, you know. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And then as far as Catholicism goes, I mean, that was largely okay. So, you know, if God became a human person in Jesus, but then I felt that, all right, well, then Catholicism, historically speaking, as I understand history, that is the Church of the Apostles. Has it changed and developed over the thousands of years? Absolutely, absolutely. It does not look just like it did. Not even pretending that. But at least it has that root.
Like the Eastern Orthodox, it has roots in history.
Exactly. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. And so I decided, you know, all right, well, okay, going for that. So that's the, okay, back to Catholicism route.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the becoming a Jesuit thing goes. All right. So
Oh, you.
Yeah. The first time I actually felt like I really kind of noticed Jesuits was actually, of all things, watching The Exorcist as an atheist with my then fiance. You know, have you seen The Exorcist?
The original?
Yeah.
Yes, many times.
Okay. Are you a horror movie buff? Because I'm kind of a horror movie nerd.
I like horror movies.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of person who's going to remember all the details, but I watch a lot of horror movies that aren't the what do they call the Saw type flicks?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I see what you're saying.
I like horror where they're like creepy and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I hear you. Mm.
But anyway, The Exorcist with your fiance.
Yeah, Exorcist with fiance, right? And so, like, if you remember, it's like the opening scene, I think, of The Exorcist, right at the very, very beginning, where Father Marin is in Iraq on an archaeological dig.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I remember watching it and I'm thinking, you know, oh my gosh, this friggin' guy, you know, like, here he is, this priest, doing archaeology. Like, how cool is that, you know? Like, I'm thinking, like, this guy's got it made. Bear in mind, like, an hour later into the story, he did not have it made. Things went really bad for the guy. But, you know, in the very beginning, like, the opening scene, I thought, how cool is this, you know? So I remember mentioning that to my parents, you know, and having this attitude, like, it's this priest whose hobby is archaeology. And them saying, well, no, I mean, that character is a Jesuit. I mean, it's not his hobby. That character is almost certainly, like, a real archaeologist.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, this is how Jesuits are.
That's his calling.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, okay, well, I don't go in for this God stuff, but these Jesuits are all right, you know? And so I ended up respecting the Jesuits for their academic prowess and their intellect. And that stuck with me. So then now, you know, as a new Catholic, if you will, and also now a single Catholic, you know, all right. So I started kind of just I try and get back out there, you know, to the dating world, and you know, things are going fine, but you know, have a relationship here, relationship there. But, you know, nothing really sticks in a long-term way, you know, none of those ones. And, you know, I was kind of, you know, feeling the pressures as far as, you know, maybe to sort of kind of get married or something like that, settle down and have a wife. And I remember saying as a total joke, I didn't mean a word of this, none of it was honest, but I just said as a total joke once, if by the time I retire from the military and I'm not married, do you think the Jesuits would take me? You know? I said that. Just like this pathetic, desperate thing to say.
Please tell me, for the making this story even better, you said it to your Catholic mother or father.
Yes! Yeah. So I let that out there, you know? And then it's like blah, 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 blah. You know, hang up the phone, all that other stuff, you know? And go on with my life. But that stupid fucking joke, it planted a seed. And, like, it wouldn't go away. This idea of being a Jesuit. Mm-hmm. And I hated it. I never wanted to be a Jesuit, you know? The idea of celibacy, especially celibacy, just like, no. But then again, that idea wouldn't leave, and I would daydream about it, you know. And my daydreams were not remotely accurate. I mean, like, I remember this image of a guy and like dressed in like this Benedictine habit, which Jesuits don't wear. Like, that is not Jesuit,
because they're not Benedicts.
Right, exactly. But wearing that in like this vast university library and just studying my butt off, you know, that's how I like imagined it, you know. Nothing about that, no, is true. But you know, that was this image, and I would kind of be thinking more and more about being a Jesuit. And I would even find myself, you know, on beajesuit.org every now and then, you know, and then I would realize I was on that website, and then just, you know, like, oh God, you know, and just like smash the computer down, you know, and just like, no, nothing doing, you know. But yeah, but that's kind of what my thinking was. And it wouldn't leave, this idea of being a Jesuit. And I honestly, I can't emphasize enough how much I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely didn't want it. Especially the celibacy thing. I figured, you know, kind of like, God, I've already started, you know, believing in you. I've already, you know, been doing this church thing. I'm trying to be a good person. You know, I'm in many ways materially very generous, and giving. What more do you really want? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Can I at least have, you know, romantic relationships and sex and all that other stuff? Come on, you know? Is this too much to ask for me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want it. And I remember thinking, well, why do I even care about this being a Jesuit thing? And I thought, well, the only reason I should care is if this is something Jesus wants me to do. Okay. Why do I have to care about what Jesus wants? What can I do to make it so Jesus has no claim over me? You know? So I thought, how can I dissolve Jesus and turn him into a mere mortal? Still a great guy, but just a mere mortal. Someone who doesn't have a claim over me as a God. So I bought a Quran, and I, you know, started reading it. I would go to Friday prayers at the local mosque, and I would meet with an imam to try and convert to Islam.
That's okay.
Yeah.
This is why I love hearing people's stories, because they're never predictable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was doing this for, you know, a couple months, and I'll be honest with you, there was a lot of positive things about it. The imam that I was talking with, a lovely, lovely man.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing but love and respect for the guy, and he was very gentle with me. And a good man. And I was this close to converting to Islam when it dawned on me that I was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
That I wasn't at all happy. And I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to make a major life decision, I probably shouldn't do it out of misery, you know?
Not
And
really a good place to be making a choice from.
right, you know? So I thought, okay, well, when was the last time that I was happy and joyful, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that was, you know, as a practicing Catholic, that was reading the Bible, living the sacramental life, reading things like, you know, say the Confessions of St. Augustine or other things like that. And, you know, honestly, if I didn't understand what I was reading, everything that I was reading, and I promise you at the time I didn't. And I still don't. You know?
I was just going to say.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, but even though I didn't understand everything, I still had this feeling of being encouraged. You know, this feeling kind of like what in the Jesuit Ignatian tradition we call consolation, where kind of like God is kind of nudging you along, saying, "Hey, you're on the right path. Just kind of keep going with it."
Mm-hmm.
And I had that then. So I made an appointment with a priest, you know, and so I meet up with a priest. And I start the conversation in really the most arrogant way I can think of. Like, this is how I opened the conversation. I said, all right, Father, I'm going through a crisis of faith. I'm flirting with Islam. I'm open to coming back to Catholicism. Convince me, you know? And, yeah. And this priest, you know, God love him, he didn't pull any punches. He just said straight up, you know what? I don't need to convince you to have faith. As far as I'm concerned, and as far as I can tell you, you got plenty of faith. But you know who you are. You're the rich young man in the Gospels who doesn't want to give up everything and follow Jesus. So my question for you is, what are you so afraid of? You know, I hadn't said anything yet other than what I just told you about the convince me. That's all I had said.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him then, well, I am terrified that God is calling me to become a Jesuit. And as soon as I said that, you know, all the peace that I had lost came back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And this wave of consolation. And are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he asked me, you know, I say that I'm terrified that God is calling me to become a Jesuit, and this wave of consolation and peace. And I decided right then and there, okay, well, I am going to, no joke, discern prayerfully if this is what God is calling me to do, to become a Jesuit. So my flirtation with Islam went away, and I went back to being a committed Catholic. But still not excited about the idea of maybe becoming a Jesuit, but at least willing to take the possibility that I have a vocation seriously. Well, literally days after that conversation with the priest, I got orders to Jordan.
Okay.
And I'm thinking about the about discerning with the Jesuits. And here's the problem. You know, honestly, I had never once in my life seen a Jesuit. I had never met a Jesuit.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, it was just, I saw The Exorcist. I had read about them in some courses that I've been taking. Like, I know nothing about, I don't know one Jesuit, you know? So I'm in Jordan now. And for a little bit of context, my job there was to be a liaison and advisor to the Jordanian Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
As they and we were getting involved against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. That was my job. And it was with you know, the small team that I was working on. We were doing, you know, 24/7 duties, and I would often work nights, and just with the way my schedule worked out, Sunday mass, at any of the main pairs, practically at all, was just not going to happen there in Jordan. So where could I possibly go for mass? And so, you know, looking it up, the only game in town that worked with my work schedule was this very small community of Jesuits who live downtown Amman. And I could go to daily mass there. And so after work, you know, I would, you know, sneak on to downtown Amman and have mass with the Jesuits, and then start spiritual direction with them, and and just do that. So I remember the very first time meeting with my spiritual director, and he asked me, you know, kind of, so what do you why are you interested in spiritual direction right now? And I told him, well, you know, because I want to find out, you know, if God wants me to be a Jesuit. And he was like, oh, okay. I hear that. Let's not worry about that right now, though. Let's not. Let's just focus on just your prayer. like, how is your prayer life going? And I described my prayer life. My prayer life was, things like the rosary, the liturgy of the hours. There's this kind of sort of conversational prayer that I would sort of have, on commutes or something like that, or just walking from one end of the hall to the other, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he introduced me to this style of prayer called Ignatian Contemplation, which have you ever heard of that by any chance?
I've heard of it. I do not remember what it is. I just
Sure.
remember
Yeah.
the name.
Yeah, it's a kind of prayer that is very deeply imaginative. It rests under the assumption that, okay, well, God gives us all our capacities and gifts, honestly, for the purpose and with the intention that we can use them to better know and love God and know and love each other, you know? And so even our imagination can be used for that.
Mm-hmm.
So part of Ignatian contemplation would be to either to take a scene from the Gospels and put yourself in that scene in your imagination as like an actual character, as someone there,
Mm-hmm.
and then just do stuff, be there, interact, talk to people, and just kind of let go and let things and let your imagination just run with it, and trusting, that the Holy Spirit's at work, kind of guiding your imagination away,
Okay.
Yeah. So I remember it was the very first time of that I did this type of thing. It was the priest, my spiritual director, had asked me about my relationship with Mary. He was just curious,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I respect her and all, but like, but I just don't really feel drawn to it. So many of the prayers that I'm familiar with about Mary just seem like Mary worship, and that's not something I'm remotely interested in, So I kind of avoid her. And my spiritual director's response was, "I hear that, I totally hear that. But I mean, just because you don't really want a relationship with her doesn't mean she doesn't want one with you. And she might be able to help you with your relationship with God, Like, she might have some insights, And so that made me kind of think, okay, well, she wants a relationship with me. Well, I don't want to be rude, like, I'll probably, all right, I'll look into a relationship with her. So my very first Ignatian contemplation was to imagine Mary and little, like, 5-year-old Jesus, Jesus outside playing with his friends in Palestine, and Mary just kind of looking on. And then let's just see what happens, So, I put myself into that scene, and I see Mary pretty much send Jesus off to go play. And I was immediately struck just by the tenderness between them, Jesus goes off to play with little kids, and then Mary just kind of sits down outside the house, and I can see Joseph, in his work shed, doing his thing as a carpenter, and there's Mary just sitting down, and I hear this voice behind me is saying, "Go to her, talk to her," So I go to Mary, and I sit down next to her, and it's awkward as hell, like, like I don't know what to say to her, I look at her, she kind of smiles at me, and look back at the kids, and I say, "Oh, just the dumbest thing," like, I gesture to Jesus, and I go, They sure do grow up quick, you know. I say that. I literally say that, you know, like an idiot. and, and she gets this look on her face, you know. She just looks at me, this little smirk, you know, and saying and says like, really, like, small talk about how fast kids grow up. Is this really what you want right now? You know? Is this what you came to me for? You know, and it was so disarming that I was like all right, let's have like a serious talk, you know. So I had kind of prepared a list of questions that I would ask her, you know, these things that had kind of bothered me for a while, things that, you know, these kind of, honestly, I kind of wanted to stump Mary. That's really kind of what I wanted to do, you know. So I let go my first question, you know. And I say, all right, did you ever think or wonder or wish, you know, that maybe Jesus wasn't the Messiah and that he could just be your son and you could have this normal mother-son thing and, all the grandkids and everything like that and just this normal life and you wouldn't have to deal with all his Messiah stuff, you know? Did you ever want that to happen? And Mary just gets this serious look on her face and she says, honestly, I can't think of anything worse than that, you know, than Jesus not being who he is. You know, that's like the worst thing I can think of right now. Like, no. Like, I don't want that for anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I was like, okay, all right. But even then, she still said, even though she was sort of like indignant, there was still a gentleness in the way she said that. And I felt known and loved by her.
Okay.
So I started racking my brain for like the next question, you know, that next gotcha question. And she could kind of sense that. And she just interrupted me, you know, and she stopped me, you know, and she just said that line, you know, from like the Hail Mary, Holy Mary, Mother of God, you know, she just said that. She said, Holy Mary, Mother of God. And I was like, okay, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, think about it. Like, Holy Mary, Mother of God. What you have to understand, Joe, is he was never mine. I was always his, you know? And when she said that, and the way she said that, all my gotcha questions just didn't seem so important.
Okay.
And what I noticed then, like how I felt, is I just felt understood by her.
Okay.
And loved by her. And grateful. And that was my first moment of Ignatian contemplation. And I hadn't said a word to Jesus yet in all these things. But that kind of got me on the. I was still too scared to talk to Jesus, you know. But over time, I felt a little more comfortable talking with Jesus, and I actually felt that Jesus wanted me to talk to him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so in these contemplations, I would actually talk with Jesus a little bit. And so this type of stuff goes on for a little while, and then one day, after a few weeks, my spiritual director says, hey, all right, so remember you wanted this to try and find out if you had a call to be a Jesuit or not. You know, there was information you were trying to find. Well, maybe now would be a good time to go into prayer and ask that question, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I go back to that very first place in prayer, you know, with Mary and Joseph in the work shed, you know. And I want Joseph involved in this conversation too, you know. But there I am now in their house, and you know, Jesus isn't there. It's just the three of us, you know, in this house, and they're looking at me with kind of an excitement, as if they have really good news. Man, they welcome me, they embrace me, and I'm holding their hands as I ask them, am I supposed to be a Jesuit? And nothing happens apart from this kind of disappointed look on Mary's face. And I think, okay, well, maybe let me just rephrase the question then, am I going to be a Jesuit? Do I need to be a Jesuit? Should I be a Jesuit? And nothing, and I just keep on rephrasing the question over and over and over again, in a variety of ways, until at one point I say, what can I give to God? And then Mary smiles a little bit. And all of a sudden I see these religious sisters leaving a church. And I was like, okay, well, all right, well, so there's something there. But I still don't have an answer. So the very next question I ask then is, what does God desire from me? And then I see the Eucharist. I see a church. I see an old man with his hands clasped in fervent prayer and praying up to heaven, and emotionally, before laying his hands on a younger man before him. I see the IHS kind of seal sunburst symbol that is the kind of the sign and symbol of the Jesuits. I see that. And again, the Eucharist always being a part of it. And I ask, does God want me to become a Jesuit? Does God want me to become a priest? And I look down after I feel something like around my neck and on me, and I look down, and all of a sudden I'm wearing priestly vestments, and I'm kind of freaking out right now. And I was kind of like, all right, well, here's the thing. All right, Mary, calm down. Like, here's the thing. Like, how do I know this isn't just my imagination going nuts, and or that this is just my subconscious, my unconscious kind of going crazy? Like how do I know this isn't from me? How do I know this is what God wants, or if I'm just saying this because this is something I've always known? I literally said that.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, Mary repeated my last words right back to me. Like, everything sort of fades to black, as it were, as she says right back to me, "You have always known." And then all of a sudden, this splendid light coming forth from Mary, and coming like from right behind Mary, just this shocking, gorgeous light that washes over me, and then my prayer was done. And that was the first bit of confirmation that I felt as far as my vocation. When she said, "You had always known," I thought she was referring to what I mentioned earlier, about, being an altar server as a kid, wanting to maybe become a priest, thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
But after that deployment, and I was talking with my with my parents, I'll be honest with you. I came back from that deployment rather depressed and sad and grieved, because some things that happened on that deployment. People I cared very, very deeply about were killed, and I could do nothing to save them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a great deal of survivor's guilt. And my very first deployment involved a disillusionment with war. And this deployment that I was on, involved disillusionment with my involvement in war, you know. And so I felt this call to become a Jesuit and this real impatience just to get the fuck out of the military, so I don't have to deal with this anymore, you know. But you know, I was still on contract, and I was depressed and sad, and I remember lamenting to my parents about just wanting to get this over with and be a Jesuit. I don't know if I can wait. And at that point, my mother shared a story with me. She said, you know, I know that you want to do this now, so I can tell you this. But before I knew you wanted to be a Jesuit, I couldn't in good conscience tell you this story. Because she didn't want to influence me or make me feel less free to make my own decision, you know? She said, when you were 5 years old, you came into the kitchen one day and said, "Hey, Mom, do you know what I'm going to be when I grow up?" And you know, and like my mom said to me, kind of like, "No, like, well, what are you going to be?" And she didn't really care. And the reason she didn't care, my mom, that I said this is because there was a pattern at that time. Usually I would say, "Hey, Mom, guess what I'm going to be when I grow up? I'm going to be a policeman." And she's like, "Okay, be a policeman." And then a little while later, like minutes later, I would come back and be, "Hey, Mom, did you know bad guys shoot at policemen?" And she'd be like, yeah, I heard about that. And I go, "Well, that's crazy. No, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. No, it's too dangerous. I'm going to be a fireman." And she was like, "Okay, be a fireman, you know?" And then a little while later, I would come back and be like, "Mom, did you know they actually go inside the burning buildings?" Like, yeah, they do. I was kind of, that's ludicrous. No, you know. So this was the pattern, you know? And so she was like, "What are you going to be when you grow up, Joseph?" And I said, "I'm going to be a Jesuit." Now, my mom was surprised because, as I told you, you know, we've had no interactions with Jesuits, you know, growing up. Like, I never met a Jesuit at all. And my mother was very aware of this, you know. And so she asked me, you know, "Well, what do you think a Jesuit is?" You know? And little 5-year-old me just says, "Well, it's a special kind of priest, Mom," you know. And she goes, "Okay, yeah, sure, okay." And then I scampered off to go do my 5-year-old business, you know. Yeah. And I have no recollection to this day of that. And apparently, you know, I never brought it up again. But my mother had remembered that, and whenever I would talk about being a Jesuit, she remembered that. And when I told her about what Mary had said, you know, about "you have always known," that was the first thing that came to my mother's mind.
Okay.
Yeah. But, you know, to fast forward a little while later, I reached out to the Jesuits again about applying. And, you know, and it was just a 2-year process of, you know, spiritual direction while I was still finishing out my contract. More prayers, more confirmation that, okay, I think this is really what God wants me to do. And more discernment. Yeah, and then eventually I applied and went through the whole process of all the interviews, the psychological evaluations, you know, all that other good stuff, and was accepted.
Okay.
And here I am.
And here you are, being a crazy grad student.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't miss those days. I miss the studying. I don't miss finals.
Yeah. I hear it. I totally hear it.
Okay, so I think we covered the history and the from how you went from one to the other really well.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I went too long. I apologize.
You're fine. I might chop it up into a couple of uploads, and I'm not sure. I'll figure it out. I've never done this before. We're fine. This is why I didn't live stream it, because then we can just go at our own pace.
Yeah, me neither. This is super new for me too.
So, I had a couple of questions about, I don't know how to word this, about your story. So as an atheist, I'm listening to your story, and it raises some questions about your thinking and your train of thought that I want to ask. they could be considered rude or invasive because it is going to be kind of questioning your thought process. There.
That's fair.
Are you okay with those?
I'm fine with that, yeah.
Okay. I figured you would be since you what you're studying, but, always wanted to ask. Do you remember way back in the beginning you talked about how you pictured the universe from outside, before the universe started and the singularity populating into existence and everything.
Yeah.
Cosmology. Now, I told you I don't know physics from, a hole in my foot. But there is, as I understand it, the universe may not have a beginning. It may be eternal. They don't actually know. How does that change your answer if we go, okay, the universe is eternal, it has always existed in one form or another?
Well, so to be honest with you, all right, so I don't claim a 100% certainty.
Okay.
That there is a God. I don't. I have my beliefs and my my experiences, those experiences of the divine that confirm those beliefs, but I also recognize that those only have any kind of weight or significance for me. Right.
Okay, so you're honest. You believe on faith. You believe.
Yeah. Now I do believe that the universe. Let me rephrase this. All right. I believe that if, and I'm convinced of this, that if the universe is not eternal, I do believe that it would have needed something outside of itself to bring it into existence.
Okay.
But if the universe is eternal, I'll be honest with you, that really does, at the very least, I think it's fair to say that might undermine my confidence in God. Because then I wonder, okay, well, all right. All right, if God exists, well then, all right, thinking of God primarily as a creator, well, it's just not accurate. Because if the universe is eternal, then maybe God didn't make it, or maybe God is made it, but is co-eternal. I don't understand what the hell that means,
Yeah.
But the necessity for a God hypothesis, if you will. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, it is undermined a bit.
I'll be honest. I don't understand the cosmology of anything Big Bang or before remotely. People who are smarter than me have explained to me that we don't know which way it is. We don't know if there's a start, if there's not a start, if it's a multiverse. The answer is we don't know. So that's just why I asked that question. That question we covered. This is kind of an offshoot question that doesn't really apply. It's more of a how your train of thought works. You said you were thinking about converting to Islam at one point. Do you consider all the Abrahamic religions to be as quote real, or just Roman Catholicism, or just Christianity? Are they all worshiping the same God and they're just branches from the same tree, or is one actually worshiping the God? Does that make sense as a question?
I think I understand it. So if please correct me if I misunderstand it clearly. The way I see it is, okay, so I'll be honest, I believe that Catholicism has the fullness of truth right now, but I don't believe it has a monopoly on truth.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That God is still at work in all the other worldviews, cultures, peoples, and religions of the world in some way. To the extent that a system of beliefs, has something that is true, okay, well then, I think that there's God at work in that. I don't believe that, non-Christians aren't having real, true experiences of the divine. I don't believe that. I think
Okay.
that, no, like God wants, I believe God wants relationship with all people, and that means non-Catholics as well, non-Christians as well, so God's going to, I think, is going to meet us where we are.
Okay. Okay. You kind of you brought this up yourself, but you kind of, and I don't even think you realized that you didn't really answer the question even for yourself. When you were doing I always say this name wrong. Is it Ignatian Contemplation? Ignatian Contemplation. I can never say his name. Ignatian Contemplation. When you're doing the Ignatian Contemplation, from me, who does a little bit of writing on the side, you sound like a very imaginative person who is very good at picturing a story.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go from I'm picturing a story in my head and I'm adding myself in to, yes, this is actually a real experience? Well, it would be real even if you're picturing it, but this is there's another being involved in this. Is that making sense as a statement?
Yeah, it does.
Or is that a faith thing?
Yeah. Well, the way I see it is this all in my head, or is God at work? And the answer is yes. That's totally how I see it. So, all right. So, like, for example, these images, like the physical features and the stuff like that of, like, say the characters of, like, Jesus, Mary, the apostles, yada, yada, yada. I think, okay, well, these are characteristics that I bring, like, I don't pretend that I've somehow gotten a glimpse into this is what the historical Jesus really looked like, like no, this is like what my mind conjured up,
Yes.
Probably based off memories, and things I've seen in art or movies or something like that,
The infancy gospels, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, like there's all sorts of things that I've just associations that I've made, so like it is very much every aspect of it is a cognitive exercise that's happening, like and that doesn't change. There's no point where it's kind of like all right, I'm done, the Jesus take the wheel and run with it. No, it's like no, it's not like that. No, I'm still doing this,
Okay.
What the idea is, though, is that in those contemplations, that God is kind of sort of guiding my imagination.
Okay.
In a way, kind of coaxing it in one direction or another, to kind of help the scene to go, in a to help me get the insights or the graces or whatever the case that God wants for me in those moments, But yeah, I'm under no illusion that it's that this isn't all coming from me. Like in many ways it is,
No, your answers are very honest. I really appreciate it. It's great. Hey, you don't know how many theists I interact with who wouldn't be that honest. Who would be like, it's all God. Just like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Yeah. Okay, let me see here. So, do you remember the optional section in the Word doc with the hard questions about the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
You up for that still?
Yeah, and I trust your judgment, whatever you wanna talk about.
Okay, so obviously Roman Catholic Church has been involved in more than a few controversies the last couple of decades. The current big one is obviously the priests who have been proven to have been hidden and moved around by the church to protect the church reputation, but they're pedophiles. What do you think about the church hiding them and protecting them?
I think it's fucked up and evil.
Okay.
Like there's like I'm not an apologist for the church or even for Catholicism. Like no, like this is yeah, like there's I don't think that there's a I think the nicest thing I can say about the excuses that some people will make, some apologists for the church, to say, well, what you have to understand is this and that and blah, 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 blah about that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sure we've all heard. The nicest thing I could say about those things is that they are in incredibly poor taste. That's the nicest thing I can say about them, you know? It's like, dude, read the room, you know? Like no, this is never not wrong.
Okay.
Let's not even try and pretend that it's no.
So, how do you feel? Have you thought? I don't even know if you've thought about this, or is there some? I assume there's conversations going on about this all over the place. How do you feel the church should do? What do you think the church should do going forward to stop this from happening again? To deal with what's going on right now?
Yeah. So I don't know.
Okay.
The what I am increasingly convinced of, though, and this is just me, that the church hierarchy, as it were, can't be the only people in that conversation. That's something I'm kind of convinced of. That survivors, victims, their families, the criminal justice system, counselors and psychologists and academics, all that need to be in that part of that conversation, and that the church needs to adopt a kind of tone and role of, honestly, kind of the penitent, humble one, where it's like, all right, you know what, we fucked up. Where can we go from here in a way that is just at all, you know? I don't, that can be difficult, I think, for the church to try and get off its high horse, you know? but I think that's really going to be needed.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. And also, the tone of defensiveness that has so marked the way the church presents itself throughout history needs to be replaced by compassion. And if that means that the church is going to, you know, take a few punches to the face over this kind of stuff, then so be it.
Okay.
And so be it. But yeah, I personally, I don't know what the answers are, but I do think a change of approach is certainly needed.
Seems like a very honest answer to me, and a good one. So the Catholic Church, this is a different topic. Catholic Church led the lawsuit in New York State to get permission to break the health guidelines so that they could have large masses again. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So honestly, I'm sympathetic to the people who, I get it, who want to go back to mass.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I get it. You know, there are very faithful Catholics who honestly haven't been to mass in many, many months, really since this whole thing began. You know, and they're hurting, and I hear that. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes we have to question, all right, this sense of urgency that we feel, how do we discern that? Is this sense of urgency coming from something good or not?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say, okay, so what is... I think of the parable of the Good Samaritan, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, like, the way it begins, you have, like, this lawyer, kind of like this, like, a specialist in, like, the religious law in Torah,
Mm-hmm.
and this priest going down to Jerusalem, and then you have the guy on the side of the road, broken and beaten and bloody. And they see him and they keep on going. Now, presumably, this priest and this, lawyer were on their way to Jerusalem to fulfill their religious duties.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably, and they see this guy and they just abandon him and go about their religious duties. Who is the true neighbor in that story but the Samaritan who looks after him and takes care of him? I think in this moment, we're called to be true neighbors to each other. And that means that the fulfillment, going down to Jerusalem to the temple to fulfill our religious duties, maybe that's not the most important thing. Maybe what's really important is being good neighbors to each other and doing what we can to slow down the spread of this pandemic.
Okay.
And, I mean, so many dioceses and the Pope has encouraged us kind of like, yeah, all right, hey, the Sunday obligation, you're dispensed from that. Let's get this thing figured out and under control, and then we'll get back to this, And, yeah, I think part of loving the neighbor is wearing a mask, avoiding crowds, even at mass, even at church, and just trying to use common sense. That's loving your neighbor today.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to hit the stop button.
Okay.
Okay, so like I was saying, that went really well. And I have to tell you, I'm still an atheist. Sorry, you didn't convert me with your story. I know you weren't trying to. I was just making a joke.
Not my intention even.
Just making a joke. Have to make the joke. But if somebody's going into the Catholic Church, I hope more priests like you are coming up.
Thank you.
Because your honesty is great. And like I said earlier, you remind me a lot of my favorite priests growing up, who'd had some life experiences and who were thinking and talking and looked at their religion as something to support the community and not something the community should support, if that made sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And that resonates.
So yeah, how you were using your religion, to both not tear down the church, but go, yes, we can improve and we can do better and we can support our community. So that's all great things.
Thank you.
I want to get this. Did you have any questions for me before we stopped recording?
Oh my gosh. Now, I was honestly, I was like afraid to like bring up any questions, so I didn't even think, because I feel like this is your operation. I didn't want to like hijack it or anything like that. So
go for it. You're fine. All right. Well, then I'm gonna hit the stop button again.
Okay.
Where's the stop button? Remember, guys, sing and dance. Life is way too short not to enjoy the music.